Hello, my name is Osha. I like talking about American presidents. Today I'm continuing my discussion uh, of the Fourth Amendment application to a case, a real life situation that I'm actually experiencing, which is a color of law violation of my constitutional rights. And this is happening in Montgomery County, Maryland, superintended by a corrupt judge, Judge James Bonifant of Montgomery County, who has committed judicial misconduct in order to obstruct justice. And I did an earlier video uh, in which I titled it How Judge Bonifant of Maryland Obstructed Justice, right? And that was a part one, and this is part two. So I'm continuing with the narrative of statements, like a statement of facts, so to speak, of what happened, right? What happened. And I'd gotten to May 16, 2023, when I was assaulted by ostensibly Montgomery County police officers. On that day, I had been waiting for a an appointment with the U.S. Navy for what was billed a Navy General Officers Professions program with a Lieutenant Devon Blake, and I have an email as evidence, right? I have an email as evidence of this appointment, that was what I was waiting for from 11 a.m. So all the action that had happened, you know, I thought, it was, I was being gaslighted. So all along, I was thinking that, well, it's regarding this appointment that I'd been scheduled for with Lieutenant Devon Blake of the United States Navy for the Navy General Officers Professions Program. But it turned out, of course, that was a hoax. I was being swatted. So who swatted me? So I already described the statement of facts. I'm not going to describe what happened again. I'm going to continue. This is now May 17. So from May 16, I ended it with I was handcuffed. The law enforcement broke into my armed men broke into my apartment. They released gases, noxious gases that were knocking me out, and some kind of narcotic. I had been drugged, right? And they handcuffed me naked. I was naked, and they removed me from my apartment where I was living alone, placed me on a gurney. I was bleeding. They had already shot me in the head with a projectile. I was bleeding, and they put me in an ambulance. In the ambulance, they knocked me out, right? There were several people in it, and they knocked me out with a drug, and I had no more consciousness, right? No more consciousness. So it was just lights out, right? So if there was an appearance like I was conscious or whatever, it was the effect of drugs. So lights out, they've done something. There are different types of narcotics that they can use, different types of drugs to knock one out. And that was what happened in the ambulance on May 16, 2023. So this is now May 17, 2023. I wake up May 17, 2023. I wake up uh, in a room by myself. I'm dressed in scrubs, paper scrubs. And this is May 17, 2023. I'm in severe pain, terrible pain. I see the end of a tube, right? End of an intravenous tube, right? I'd been on a drip for a while, and I see blood in the tube. There's still some, and it's plastered, taped to my wrist. So it means they drew blood from me, right? So they drew blood from me without my consent. So I'm in a hospital, and I'm alone in the room. So I'm in paper scrubs already. So somebody's dressed me up, right? Because I was naked when they removed me from my home. I'm completely lucid, right? But I realize, and my head is bandaged. There's a bandage on my head, right? So I remembered consciously that yes, I'd been shot in the head. Um, by the way, on that day, the day before, I called my friend at work that I'd known. I was terrified, and what she said is, I called her, told her they're trying to destroy my reputation. That's what she said. She remembers I told her. She said I was terrified, right? I remember I called her, and so I was not in psychosis in my apartment because I knew what was going on, despite the fact that I'd been drugged, but I was rational, right? So if you're in psychosis, you have no idea what's going on. So I knew what was going on. I was rational, and of course, I was terrified because I was ambushed, right? I was besieged. I'd been shot at. I'd been tased. I didn't know why it was happening. I was ambushed. There was a drone outside. This swarms of uniformed men around me, surrounding me, and I'm alone. I'm thinking, okay, are these guys here to kill me? It's not what the Navy had told me was going to happen. The Navy had told me there was some kind of exercise. I was supposed to have a physical and psychological fitness test for an officer's program to join military intelligence. That's what they told me, and this was not what was going on. So this was a hoax. It was a swatting. It looked like something had happened, but I didn't know what was going on at this point because I wake up May 17, 2023. I'm in a hospital and dressed in scrubs. There's bandage on my head. The first thing is I'm glad. Of course, I'm glad that I'm alive. I'm not morose or anything. I'm pretty, I feel good, at peace, sanguine, because I'm glad I'm not dead. I'm alive. The day before I'd been terrified, right? Terrified by what was going on. The attack, the dehumanization. I thought that was the end, that these people were gonna kill me. But here I was, at least I was alive, right? There's a saying in the Bible, a live dog is better than a dead lion. So I was alive. I was happy. I'm not dead. I'll find out what's going on. So because I knew I'd been shot in the head, and because what happened the day before, I'd never experienced before. It was a terrifying experience. So one of the things I did was, even though I was in terrible physical pain all over my body, my whole body ached. I couldn't move anything. There was tightness in my chest, constriction. I couldn't move anything. I'd never ached like that. There was aches, or it was like they'd beaten me up. And then, by the way, my jaw, my jaw felt like I'd received a massive blow. So I don't know if they took me something, they may have taken me somewhere to go and torture me and beaten me up. I don't know, because they drugged me in the ambulance. But my jaw was like I'd received severe blows all over. My body ached everywhere. There was no explanation. And I'd never been in that kind of pain before. But it was hard for me to move, to get out of bed. But one of the first things I did was I tried to test my memory, right? That I was sane, that I was rational. I tried to test my memory. Um, because even the day before, when I realized I'd been drugged, I started to do something. In fact, 2 days before that, when I realized I'd been drugged, I wrote something down and I told my friend. I told my friend and I emailed as evidence, that, hey, something funny is going on. I'd been drugged and I wrote stuff down. And I started to do things just to control my thoughts, to make sure, okay, hey, I'm rational. I'm not imagining stuff, what's going on. And just in case, so I don't use drugs, but I saw that it worked for me. Everything I did, I was able to confirm. One of the things that I did was, I started writing things down and I wanted to control my mind, right? I thought, okay, in fact, I got sheets of paper and I started writing scribbled just stuff. I was writing jagged stuff, rubbish. But I made that conscious decision to write rubbish. So I knew, okay, I'm rational, not that I'm trying to write something normal. So I was like, okay, I'm controlling myself. And I thought, okay, let me write in code. I'm going to do something in my mind and I'm going to decode it. So I put it down because I wanted to be able to see it later on. That, okay, this is, I'll be able to see it later on that, okay, this is what I did. And I sent my friend an email as well. And but I wrote it. I wrote with history that I could my memory was good. I could remember things, what happened. So I wrote about how I arrived in America, what happened when I first arrived in 1999 in Troy. I wrote that. I wrote a code that I told my friend for I've been drugged, right? And that was garbled. I've been drugged, garbled. I wrote it down so I knew how to decode stuff. My memory was good. I knew how to think deep in terms of decoding things, and I was happy. I wrote about how I felt. I was grateful. I felt grateful. So I was not. I knew I was not in despair. I was not. There was nothing wrong. So it's funny that I knew how to test myself. So I wrote all these things down, and I wrote something again that my friend would know. Right. This was a friend who had. Um, I wrote something down, and it was several amounts. Right, and she had loaned me something, and I wrote it in several amounts, right? Precisely. Only she'd be the only person who knew, she and I. So she was like, okay, there's nothing wrong with this guy. He's thinking. I wrote it down. I just broke it down. I didn't say what it was. And I was just trying to say, so she'd be able to know, okay, hey, there's something going on. My friend is normal. And fortunately, she knew. My friend had worked for the DOD before, and my friend was saying, "Look, everything that happened was from the Department of Defense because I'd filed, I was in a pending lawsuit regarding EEO complaint, and I had reported my bosses for committing fraud, including a Nathan R. Brown for committing fraud. I reported into the Naval Inspector General's office and the DoD Inspector General's office. Ironically, he's still working in the IG's office. So you could imagine somebody who committed fraud. I had evidence of his fraud. I hid it. I put it down. Evidence of his fraud. So we're auditors, we're supposed to catch fraud, but it turns out that there was this group that was auditing a certain group of people in the Navy, and instead of exposing fraud, they're hiding it, just like Enron. Arthur Anderson, if anybody remembers, it used to be was a Big Five. I think most people know it now as the Big Four. Let me see. So because I was an accounting major, I knew them before. So it used to be Pricewater. Arthur Anderson was the number one of all the CPA firms, the big national CPA firms. In fact, they were global. Arthur Anderson, PricewaterhouseCoopers, there was KPMG, there was Deloitte, and there was Ernst and Young. So they were big five. So now most people know them as the Big Four because the number one, Arthur Anderson, they were involved in a scandal and the Enron corruption scandal. So when your auditors are also your consultants and they're covering up fraud for you and saying your financials are good, right? And so we as auditors in the Department of the Navy, we're supposed to be auditing defense operations and programs and things like that. And so if our auditors, because they want to, you know, be good or whatever, they're doing what they're not supposed to be doing. They're covering up or looking aside, looking away from fraud. So the auditors were being audited, right? That was the impression I was given, that the auditors were being audited. And in this case, Nathan Brown had been doing something that was not kosher for a very long time, and he was under investigation. But for some reason, Nathan Brown was trying to get rid of me, right? But in any event, that's not how I did. I wasn't aware of that. That was not relevant. At that time, my mentor was the head of the agency, the Auditor General of the Navy, Don L. Gilmore. But I'm not going to get into the details about my job or any of that right now. I'm going to continue with the narrative of what was going on because these are the possible uh, reasons why the Navy came at me the way they did. Because uh, May 16 was supposed to be an appointment with me and the Navy. Somebody saying he was Lieutenant Devon Blake reached out to me and said he was going to take me through a program to join military intelligence programs, and he called it the Navy General Officer Professions Program, and I have an email for that. But it turns out I was assaulted, I was ambushed, and I found myself in the hospital. So I'd been testing my memory to make sure everything was fine because I'd been shot in the head. Okay, so there was a bandage in my head. My head hurt. I couldn't feel any. I couldn't feel my head. Everything was numb. Everything was. My hands were numb. I couldn't feel my fingers. I couldn't feel anything, but I was in severe pain. And I noticed there were marks all over my body, all over my legs, my wrists, my hands. I had a cut, there was a bandage, there was a cut on my wrist. So somebody had cut me, right? around my wrist. It was a superficial cut, nothing deep, and then marks all over my body. It felt like I'd been tortured, right? So, uh, so that I was in severe pain, like I'd been tortured, like again, like my jaw, like I'd received a like a sledgehammer had hit me on the jaw, right? There are bruises all over my body. There are bruises under my arm. There was another huge bandage under my arm because there was a huge open wound, a gash. So somebody had been tortured, right? But I wasn't aware of, I'd been tortured in any event, and here I was. Uh, but first of all, I was alive. Uh, so I was alive. So something else I was now doing at the hospital, right? First of all, I was in the room. I tried to recall everything. What's my name? My mother tested my memory to make sure everything was fine. My name, where do I live? What do I do? Everything. I tested everything. My memory was fine. It was intact. I could remember everything. I knew my name. Everything. Uh, so I could recall everything. Prior to that, there was a lady I was in a relationship with, and we were planning a vacation, right? So apparently she was looking for me and posted on my Facebook. We're looking, so I was, she was looking for me. My friends apparently were looking for me. I'd been posting on my LinkedIn. Everybody was like, hey, where the heck are you? Because normally I post everything on Facebook. People can see my timeline. I have friends, it's a different age, right? You can't just be isolated. And I'm a very Facebook, social media person, right? So people can see my activities. So, but here I am. I'm alone. I'm in pain. I'm alive, but I'm bandaged up, right? The bandage, bandages on my wrists where there had been a cut. They'd drawn blood from me, right, in a tube without my consent or my family's consent. Apparently. Um, so uh, but I could remember everything. I was trying to remember everything. My memory was fine. My memory was intact. I tested that everything was intact. Then I get up. I eventually go out. There's a little lobby place where you could eat. They had me eat. I could, they had food for me. I could eat. And somebody came around. There was a guy I saw just after I woke up. A guy I saw, and he was a black guy. He had dreads, and he was dressed in, I think, police uniform. He was a cop, right? He was law enforcement. He was a cop. Uh, but what was interesting is he was dressed in his uniform, and he walked in a slovenly, sluggish, arrogant manner. What was interesting about him is I had seen him before, so he came to check on me to see. He looked at me. He didn't greet me. He looked arrogant and smug, and I remembered who he was. He had come into my apartment a few days ago. Right now, I was dressed as law enforcement, but he came into my apartment a few days ago. I lived alone, and he was dressed as maintenance. He was dressed as maintenance. So he came. He said he came to check the lights. So he went into my bathroom, took a picture while I was there. So basically, I was taking a picture of me as well because he took a picture. He was like, we were standing in front of a mirror, and he was saying he was just checking the lights. He went into my living room, my dining area. He turned on the lights, took pictures of it and everything. Um, he said he came to check maintenance. So it turns out I'm seeing him now. He's no longer wearing maintenance clothes. He's dressed as a law enforcement. So I see he's a cop. So the building sent a cop to come into my apartment. So that's an illegal search. They never showed me a warrant, a search warrant, nothing. So they used a cop to come and look, scrutinize my apartment, which was illegal. I'm not a criminal. I've been living there for about 2 years, and I was actually a federal government employee. Yeah, I will do another video so I just don't digress. I want to keep this tight. The previous one I did was very long. I'm going to talk about what was going on, the harassment I was suffering from the property managers of the building. I'd suffered harassment. I'd reported it to the police. The police asked me to come and get a restraining order against the property manager who had started off with sexual harassment, and I ignored her, and she did a swatting. So it had been done before, but it failed the first time. So I'm going to do a separate video just talking about what was going on with the building, and I'd filed a complaint against the building. I'm a law-abiding person. I have a law degree from George Washington University Law School. So, I didn't go to law school to be bullied, and I believe in the law, right? The rule of law. I don't break the law. I don't expect anybody to break the law to violate my rights, right? So that's just how it is. But I'm seeing that America is a thuggish nation. It's filled with people who are thugs, and including law enforcement people who violate the law. They break the law. They don't respect the law, and so. But of course, the law can discipline them. I still have faith in that, right? As Dr. Martin Luther King is said to have said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. So so I noticed this guy, his law enforcement, he comes to check me up at the hospital, and I see he's actually a cop. He's the same person that had been in my apartment a few days before, dressed like he was maintenance coming to check that the lights were fine. But he was using it to actually come and do an illegal search of my apartment. And he was actually a police officer. So that's first of all that's an illegal search right there. I'm not a criminal, right? There was no probable cause. Um, Remember, that was why I did an earlier video regarding probable cause. And remember, the Supreme Court had said the reason why we have the probable cause standard is, so that um, our privacy rights are not, that we're not subjected, that citizens are not subjected to rash and unreasonable interferences with their privacy, right? And they're not, and also not subjected to unfounded charges of crime. I was not committing a crime. There's no reason for the police to come and surveil my apartment, right? Pretending they're maintenance. I'm not a criminal. I don't sell drugs, right? I don't have children in my apartment. I'm not a rapist. I'm not a fugitive, right? There's no reason for, I don't have arms. I don't have own a single gun. And I'm going to continue with all of this. So there's no reason for, and I have a right to my privacy. So my privacy rights were being violated again. So I was subjected to a rash and unreasonable interference with my privacy when there was no probable cause, and and subjected to an unfounded charge of a crime. That's the reason why the probable cause standard is supposed to be there. And let me just remind us again of what the probable cause standard is. The probable cause standard is where there are facts and circumstances. These are very important. The sequence is not important, but these are very pertinent though. Some of the phrases they use, facts and circumstances, you know, uh, um, and facts and circumstances, uh, and knowledge, and knowledge which the officer has, facts and circumstances within the knowledge of the officer, um, and also supported by uh, reasonably trustworthy information, facts and circumstances within the knowledge of the officer with reasonably trustworthy information, um, sufficient, right, to form a reasonable belief. You see, reasonable belief again, reasonable belief, which a man of reasonable caution, right, a man of reasonable caution would have that a crime is being committed. So so facts and circumstances. There are no facts and circumstances. Reasonable caution. Uh, it's unreasonable that a man like me, I've lived there for 2 years, in the building for about 2 years. In the whole community of that Silver Spring, I'd lived in aggregate between 6 and 7 years, right? And because once I lived in Judea Warrior's home for 3 years, right? Although he had me sleeping on the floor of a storage room for 3 years, I once lived there. And, and also I moved out and I got a place of my own, and people knew me, right? I'd never committed any crime, never been arrested, and I'd lived in America most of my life. Now, so people knew me, and I was working for the federal government, right? I lived in that building for 2 years. So the facts and circumstances did not create probable cause or sufficient knowledge for the police to come and interfere with my privacy, right? Um, at least as I knew them at that time. So I realized that this guy was a cop. And let me remind us of what the Fourth Amendment is. So let us keep it in mind, because all of this has to do with the Fourth Amendment as well, right? Fourth Amendment protects us because our home is our castle, and it protects us from unreasonable searches and seizures. So it's the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures um, uh, shall not be violated, right? Shall not be violated. And no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, particularly describing the place or persons, uh, the place and persons to be the place to be searched and persons or things to be seized. Let me repeat that. Um, uh, I like to memorize it the way it was written down in the Bill of Rights. And the Bill of Rights was written by our fourth president, James Madison. So it goes, the rights of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects, uh, against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. And that's the Fourth Amendment. So probable cause, we see that's very important. You need to have probable cause. A warrant, no warrant, nobody showed me a warrant. So I realized on that day when I saw that police officer that he was not really maintenance. He'd come in and violated my privacy because it was law enforcement, it was the government, and he tricked me, right? So that was an illegal search right there. So anything he saw was illegal. He did an illegal search. He didn't take anything, but in fact, because he took photos, so photos of my apartment, those were illegal. Took photos of my apartment because he was a cop, so that was illegal. So the exclusionary rule. Remember, and the derivative of an illegal search. So that's the photos that he took. Remember um, what the case of, which is the provenance of the fruit of the poisonous tree. It called it a derivative at the time, a derivative of an illegal search, and which the derivative is just fruit. The poisonous tree is illegal search or seizure, right? The illegal search, the illegal act by the government or the police. And, you know, uh, and Oliver Wendell Holmes had said in the Silverthorne Lumber Company versus the United States that it is a lesser evil that some criminals escape than that the government play an ignoble part. Ignoble means disgraceful, right? Something disgraceful, dishonorable, and that's for the government to be sneaking, pretending like their maintenance, a cop to be pretending like their maintenance to violate the privacy, the rights, to intrude on an American citizen's privacy. And that was what happened, right? So they did an ignoble search. I don't know why they did it, but I'm going to continue with the narrative and things will unfold. So the photos he took Of course, were illegal. He took photos of my apartment. That was illegal. So we will learn later on why he did that. Now, like I said, I'm gonna do a subsequent video just discussing my relationship with the property managers, not the tenants. Right, the only couple of tenants I talked to were very cordial. In fact, a few days before that incident, um, my neighbor on the fifth floor took me to an African restaurant to buy food. Right, cordial relationship. So, um, and let me continue with the narrative. So, um, I eat my food, and this was, the 17th. Then a nurse who told me she was Ghanaian origin. She came to talk to me. I think she was a registered nurse, and she told me, she explained what I was feeling. I told her I was in pain. I don't take painkillers. I'd never used painkillers in my life, but I needed painkillers, and I was really in pain from all the whatever. So she explained that it's the taser, that I was tasered, and the tasered tightened up my muscles. That was the explanation, because I couldn't understand why I was in pain, like somebody had been beaten up or tortured. She said it was a taser, that the taser tightens off, that I was tasered a lot, and it just tightened up all my muscles, and that's, so I'm feeling pain from all of that. She told me she was going to give me medication to relieve the pain, but she never did. And then she explained to me that what was shot into my head was a taser dart, that they shot the taser dart to my head. And she said they shouldn't have shot a taser dart, that it violates the law. I don't know anything about taser guns or whatever, because I'd never had interactions like that with the police before. Never been tasered before. I'm not a violent man. I'm not interested in firearms. And so she said I was tasered in the head. It was not supposed to be over my shoulder. She took the time to be saying all of that they shouldn't have tasered me beyond a certain body part, but that they shot it into my head, and that was what the taser was, and that was why they removed it. That they had to do an incision. So you see, there's stitches here; they're still there. So they left me with permanent scarring, and there's still that area. I still can't feel it. So it's been 3 years, and I still can't feel it. So they damaged my nerve permanently. They gave me permanent nerve damage, right? So, but anyway, she said that, she explained that. Um, what else? Then she saw my hand. She was going to say, and then I guess because I'm a lawyer, I guess she realized that they drew blood or they did something, and they shouldn't have done that. So she just kept quiet, and she just babbled away. Because I could see, there had been an IV, whatever, drip in my heart, arm or whatever, and but I saw blood. So they used it to draw blood. They drew blood from me without my consent, right? They drew blood from me. I don't know what else they took without my consent. But right now she was interested in my whatever. So she mentioned that, okay, that do I want to? Are they going to put me through an MR scan or whatever to make sure nothing was damaged in my head? Because I was very concerned about that. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't use drugs, and so I take care of my brain. And the fact that I'd been shot in my head, it was very concerning for me. I wanted to make sure I was not going to have some kind of traumatic brain injury, no brain damage, nothing, So it seemed everything was fine. I was still very coherent. I knew what everything else going on, other than the pain and the fact that there was a bandage. I couldn't see it. There was still a bandage on my head. So, and that was that. The next day on the 18th, I was eating my food. There was an Ethiopian woman who brought me food. I never saw a doctor, a medical doctor. There was an Ethiopian woman. People wore masks. Um, she wore a badge saying Guru Gafari. I have a very good memory. So she wore, and this is very important, she wore a badge saying Guru Gafari. So these people were just like LPNs, nursing assistants. She did the cleaning, she changed my sheets, she did all of that, served me my food, and she wore a badge saying Guru Gafari. This is very significant, right? Guru Gafari. And there was when her shift, she was pleasant to me. She was Ethiopian, right? And she wore a mask. It was an elderly lady, maybe in her 60s, right? 60s, 50s, 60s, between that. She was pleasant. Her English wasn't very good, but she was pleasant with me. And she gave me my food, served me, like, gave me a receipt. On the receipt, we scribbled stuff, yellow marker for some reason. Um, and then on one day, uh, there was a woman who went into a former room I had. So they switched me out, or switched the room. A woman who went into the next room, they they scattered up the room, did all sorts of stuff, and then they laid down like she was there. She just jagged the room, disorganized it, everything, and she just laid down in a certain way. So I'm just observing everything. Then one other thing that happened, one day, several cops came, maybe about 6, 7, 10. They came, several cops, and they were talking to me, and they were friendly. And I was talking to them. Until one of them asked me, "What's my name? How old?" No, not my name. How old am I? And um, one of them. So they're just talking. No big deal. There was, they were just talking, and so like, man, that I really look young. I look far younger than my age. It was just saying that I looked so young, and they were saying I look very young and all that, like a kid, blah blah blah. That I didn't look my age, and so I had friendly interaction with them, and one of them, a white guy, said I should get a lawyer. I'm like, what am I getting a lawyer? Nobody's charged me with anything. I was assaulted, so I said I should get a lawyer. I'm thinking, okay, get a lawyer to file a lawsuit against the state. So I'm just listening. I'm observing. I'm still waiting. I'm alive. I'm waiting to see what's going on. On the 18th, while I was eating, a sheriff's deputy came, and he gave me what he said was a peace order. I didn't have glasses. I can't read anything without my glasses. So they didn't give me glasses. They didn't give me anything. So I couldn't read it. I wouldn't be able to see what was on the peace order until the next day. So I didn't see it. I couldn't read anything on that day. So eventually they came. They said, hey, so one guy, an Asian guy, he was very tall. He wore a mask. He was very rude. He came, and he said he wanted to give me a test. He said, no, he just said, oh, what are my strengths and my weaknesses? And I told him, that's it. That's it. And he walked out. Just asked me, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? So, all this while so they're making me think it's still that test that I was told I'm having, right, with the Navy. So when he asked me, what are my tests, what are my strengths, what are my I'm still cooperating. And I tell him what my strengths and my weaknesses are. He walks out. Then later on, they said, well, that they want to take me. So that was basically what he asked. And then in the evening, some other guy now served me my food again and changed. It was a West Indian guy. He was tall. He sounded West Indian. It was a black guy. He had a beard, lean, tall. They checked my vitals and everything. And they said my blood pressure was high from the tasing, that it had raised my blood pressure, and they were going to give me medication for that it had gone really high, and they wanted to get it back down. That from the tasing. And so the guy told me his name was Barton Leonard. He wore a badge. He said Barton Leonard. The woman said she was Guru Ghaffari. Guru Ghaffari sounds like an Ethiopian name. The guy, West Indian, he said he's Barton Leonard. That's very important because it turns out Barton Leonard and Guru Ghaffari, I wouldn't see until much later, right? I wouldn't see this until much later on. I'll see those names, Barton Leonard and Guru Ghaffari, that they were medical doctors, right? They were medical doctors. But these people were not medical doctors. They were actually nursing assistants. So they were wearing the name tags of a medical doctor. So they would pretend as if a medical doctor, Guru Ghaffari and Barton Leonard, had attended to me. They never did. If you check Guru Ghaffari and Barton Leonard, they're very high medical doctors. Barton Leonard is a white guy. Guru Ghafari is, I think, maybe an Iranian woman, Middle Eastern. These two people who attended to me were black people, and they were nursing assistants. They were not medical doctors. I never spoke with a medical doctor while I was there. So this is important because those two, Barton Leonard and Guru Ghafari, would falsify uh, an order, which I didn't. I would learn later on. But in any event, let me say what happened first of all in this hospital. So I learned this place was Suburban Hospital. So I had because it was now the 18th, and I had a deadline to meet by the 18th. So by 17th, I met that deadline. I recalled GDY's phone number. It was in my head. I called my friend Sharon Caruth's number. I called her. I asked them, to help me call these two people because I had a deadline. Remember, I had an EEOC complaint against the Department of Defense, right? And I had a law firm called Tully Rinky that was representing me. So I asked, this was on the 17th. I had promised that I was going to give them money. I was supposed to give them money. I had a authorization, and the deadline was 18th. I needed to pay them a certain amount for on the 18th, so they could file my motion to make my motion for some, response to a motion for summary judgment, right? So all of this happened interestingly 1 week before um, some motions were due in my ongoing EEOC complaint. It offered me, they had offered me some kind of settlement, which was puny, which was unacceptable. My attorneys didn't want me to accept it either. I paid about $15,000 in cash out of my pocket for them to be representing me, as particular to these people, and it had cost me about $20,000 in aggregate, right? To bring it that far. And of course, I wanted to be vindicated because it was a discrimination case, and I wanted to be vindicated. I believe in the law, and that's why I was, of course, doing it. I was pursuing it. So pursuing it, an injustice had occurred, and I wanted to be vindicated. I'd been falsely accused, and even though they'd taken it back, I wanted an apology, and I had asked my attorney to continue. Somebody had committed an act of moral turpitude. That was Jamie A. Simon, interestingly, was from Montgomery County, Maryland. She had been in the DOD at the time. I'd been sexually harassed by her, and she fabricated information, she perjured information against me, and our boss, Kirsten E. Risberg, as well. Uh, Both of them had committed acts of moral turpitude, and I had filed, a complaint, reported to the department, DOD Inspector General's office, and they were under investigation. They told me there was going to be an official inquiry opened into it, and for wrongdoing. And of course, there was an ongoing EEO complaint regarding that as well. So, but I paid a lot of money, so there was a deadline. So immediately, I realized. So it was, is it Murphy's law that what cannot go wrong will go wrong. That's Murphy's law. I didn't expect. I'd promised, I'd signed something, uh, a disclosure, a contract that I was going to pay them by the 18th because I had my salary coming in, I had money in my bank account, and I had over $6,000, and I was going to execute, but I didn't want an automatic payment. So they had so uh, I called GDURA to help me make that payment. So I was at the hospital. So I asked them to help me make a payment. So you see, I was rational. I knew what was going on. I remembered GDURA's number. So I asked the person at the station to help me call GDURA. So I told him, hey, I'm at the hospital. I told him the hospital I was in. It was a 600 North Bethesda, right, 600 North Bethesda Suburban Hospital. So I told him, look, I have a payment to make. Help me make this, blah, blah, blah. This is the amount that that needs to be done, blah blah blah. Help me execute it. They have my money. They have my card on file. They have my card on file. They should use it. Make the payment. So I wasn't there. So I took care of that. I called Sharon. I told her, hey, I'm at the hospital. This is what happened. So nobody had told me anything. I hadn't seen a physician yet, right? So this was Suburban Hospital, and then they told me that okay, they wanted to do an MRI, do a scan, my head, everything. So I'm like, fine, of course, I wanted to have everything checked. I wanted to make sure. So they said their facility didn't have enough stuff. So the person was a Black American female now talking to me. It switched. They switched shifts, and this person was just rambling. I didn't, she would say one thing, change it, say one thing, change. So at some point I said, I had stuff to do because I was in pain. They hadn't given me the pain medication. And I was like, okay, I want to leave, blah, blah, blah. I want to leave. Um, no, they said they want to refer me somewhere else. I said, okay. Um, so long as you help me take care of my pain, because I was in tremendous pain, right? So they said this place was going to take care of me. So they now told me that my health insurance, they didn't use my health insurance. It was because of my health insurance that they don't take it. I was paying health insurance. I'm very a healthy person. I was healthy. I'd never had a reason to go and see a doctor or anything like that. So, but this was now like an emergency. So, they were explaining to me that look, they don't take my health insurance, so they'd have to transfer me to another hospital that takes my health insurance. They didn't let me talk to my provider or anything, so I didn't know the details, the modalities of that health insurance. I didn't even know, I didn't know how they knew all of these things, but I was just because again, my mind was still thinking of my job, that this all had to do with, my job. And so I got my health insurance through my job, so they knew what was going on. So that was how I expected they had all this information, right? That hey, it was part of the scheduled tests that they were giving me evaluation to transition into the military to do this Navy General Officers Professions program, of which I have evidence, right? I've since learned that that was fraud. That's a fraudulent email that I got, right? So that was illegal government action again, right? You're seeing all the patterns of illegal government action going on. So the government orchestrated a swatting. So, but I'm carrying on with the narrative. So eventually I'm in pain. The sheriff also comes and gives me this peace order. I can't read it. He says it's not a summons really. I have the option to attend court. I don't have to attend court so long as I stay away from that person. That's what they're just saying, that it's not a criminal matter, but I should just stay away from this person. So I have no idea what they're saying because I can't read it. So they just said it's addressed to me. And then the transporter came, said they were transporting me to this place. So this was from North Bethesda. I live in Silver Spring, that's Montgomery County. North Bethesda Hospital is still in Montgomery County. They're now telling me they're going to take me all the way to Baltimore. So I was like, why are you going to take me all the way to Baltimore? And then I start asking for my family. Like, okay, you know what? I want my family. They're like, oh, I said, I want to speak with because I didn't have my phone. My phone was in my home. They removed me naked. I didn't have anything. So I was like, okay, you know what? And they wouldn't let me now make phone calls anymore. Once I'd called the EYA because, and the Sharon, I was now saying, hey, you know what? I want to speak with my mother. But I was in pain. I just needed immediate care because of the pain they put me in. So they said they have to take me all the way to, uh, what's it called? And I get cautious. I'm like, okay, is this voluntary? Where am we going to? Blah blah blah. They say, hey, you're going voluntarily on your own. You're not being forced. It's up to you if you want to go or you don't want to go. And the transporters came, so I said, fine. So they strapped me and I sat in. I was not handcuffed or anything. I was in pain. The journey was difficult. They transported me. I went all the way to, uh, 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 MedStar Hospital. That was where they took me to in Baltimore. So they didn't tell me, uh, so it was kind of bizarre. They transported me there. I'm going to stop this here and I'll continue with the narrative of what happened when I got to um, MedStar Hospital. And MedStar Hospital, by the way, is significant because Judge Bonifant, James Bonifant, who's been doing the false incompetency to stand trial orders, obstructing justice, and who has been showing bias, who's been rude, who's been ordering uh, fraudulent incompetency orders. Uh, he's on the board of directors of MedStar Hospital. So I'd been asking for him to recuse himself. So I was taken to the MedStar Hospital, and what happened there is very significant, right? So yeah, I'm going to stop here. My name is Osha, and I'm talking about how my rights have been violated under, color of law violations, and my Fourth Amendment rights were violated by Montgomery County police officers uh, in collaboration with the state attorney John McCarthy, and who filed false charges and uh, were in a conspiracy with Judge James Bonifant, who has attempted to coerce me to take a wrongful plea bargain offer. Of course, as you see, there was no probable cause. I don't. At this point where I'm stopping, I was not yet aware that I was charged with anything. Right? Nobody's told me anything, and I hadn't committed any crime. I didn't see anything that I had committed. In fact, a crime had been committed against me. I'd been assaulted, right, in my home. So, and this is a continuation, and I'm going to continue do a part three to show how there's been malicious prosecution um, under 42 U.S. Code Section 1983 and 18 U.S. Code Section 241 and Section 242, which is a deprivation of rights and color of law violations. This has all been part of subordination of perjury, and I'm going to show that in subsequent videos how perjury was suborned and how there's been fraud, how Judge James Bonifant committed fraud on the courts, violating my constitutional rights. So we've seen so far the police has violated my Fourth Amendment rights. I'll keep you posted. Thank you.